Hello everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to a very special edition of the movie review series. And today we are going to be talking about Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox, and we are joined once again by the one and only, the badass himself, Rex the Boss 11. Rex, great to have you back here again. How are you?
I am very well. Thank you very much. Hey guys, how's it going? Let's talk about the Justice League Flashpoint Paradox.
Alrighty then. So Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox came out in 2013, almost 9 years ago. And I thought this would be, a great opportunity to talk about this particular animated movie, simply because we know that we have an upcoming DCEU movie of The Flash, which is going to more or less tackle the Flashpoint story arc. So I thought this would be a great chance to just talk about this particular movie. So, Rex, we'll start with you first. How did you first hear about the Flashpoint Paradox story arc and this movie?
I'm not gonna lie, I heard about this years ago when we were leading up from the Arrowverse into getting, when the Flash character first started appearing in the Arrow series. And I remember there being, this film and my friend bringing this up as a more of a Flash film than a Justice League film and more of a look into the Flash. Because if I'm honest, apart from the super speed and all that, I knew nothing of the Flash character until he was being brought into the Arrowverse. At the time, I was, when I got into, or back into, should I say, the superhero and comic book films and genre in the late 2000s, the Flash wasn't really spoke about much, but this was the first opportunity, if I remember, that people got to look at what the Flash was being portrayed as in a modern version of the Flash. But I didn't watch it back then. It's only recently, over the last few months, that I've started to obviously rekindle the love for a lot to do with obviously the Batmania. Obviously, with that, obviously you want to get into more of the characters, and obviously I wanted to look at this for what it is rather than what some people might have said it was, potentially a decade ago.
Well, I've always been a big fan of the Flash. I've had like greatest stories ever told of the Flash, that compiled all of the different Flash stories from over the years. And this particular story arc about Flashpoint, I heard of it, I saw a graphic novel of it, and obviously this story arc played a huge part in the comic books that essentially rebooted the DC universe into the New 52. And this was something I didn't really take much notice of because I wasn't a big fan of the New 52, because everything that I knew about DC beforehand was what I knew, and anything after during the New 52 just kind of like crapped on everything that I knew. But it wasn't until this movie came out, I was initially excited. I thought, finally, we are getting, a Flash animated movie, because it was something I always wanted to see. And I looked at the title and it said Justice League Flashpoint Paradox. I thought, it's a Flash story, hence the title, but why would you call it the Justice League? It just didn't really make sense to me. And my friend said to me, "Oh, if you really want to know what happened, like with the New 52 and stuff, this is probably the movie you should watch, because you more or less get that question answered about why everything is different." I thought, okay, I'll check it out. And I watched it. I quite enjoyed it. But to me, this was more of a Flash movie than a Justice League movie, because I can't help but feel that the reason why they crammed in all of the DC characters was, as you said before we started talking about this, that they kind of just wanted to shoehorn it into a Justice League movie. And I always felt that maybe the reason why they called it Justice League instead of a Flash movie, because maybe they don't feel confident that the Flash could sell, as opposed to someone like a Batman or a Superman. But yeah, I quite enjoyed this for what it was. I mean, I've never really read the Flashpoint graphic novel, but it is something I will definitely check out at some point. But as an animated movie, yes, it was enjoyable, but there were a few little issues that I had with this, which we'll get into in a moment. But what was your thoughts overall on the animated side of things of the whole movie?
I thought it was pretty decent, to be honest. The animation, there was nothing wrong with it. It was definitely, transferable to what it was. It was decent quality. I will say that you have to remember as well that regardless of what the production was for this, which, I have no prior knowledge of the production for this movie or anything like that,
Yeah,
it's quite apparent that this was around the time where obviously Marvel had built the Avengers and etc. They were doing that, and DC obviously wanted to quickly catch up. And whereas the original plan, I think, was to do it in the Arrowverse, which obviously did it to a certain extent, I think they then started thrusting as many characters that we may or may not have been aware of
yeah, yeah. I
into
definitely
the
got that impression.
stories, into everything that they were basically bringing out at that point there. Because of course, that this is where they first started announcing that in the cinematic universe they were going to build to a and Justice League, continuation. Because you got to remember, this would have been in production at the same time as, say, Man of Steel would have been in production, which we clearly knew at Man of Steel that they weren't trying to build a Justice League or anything like that. They were just trying to reboot the Superman character.
Yeah,
This is
that's
the
right.
aftermath or the effect of, like we say, maybe this was just a Flash movie at first. Flash is taking on a rogues gallery of villains, and you'd get small cameos from the Justice League characters as he goes along. But no, they turn this into a full Justice League film, even though in a way it's weird because none of the actual Justice League characters that are in this are actually in this for too long. It's like alterations and alternate versions of the Justice League
Yeah,
characters as we know them. But overall, I thought it was definitely watchable. I don't want to come across as, because I'm not screaming and shouting of how good it is, I don't want to come across as in this was unwatchable, because it certainly wasn't unwatchable. It was definitely watchable. And there were some eye-opening moments and some, team-up situations that you might not see in any other version of the DC universe. So you got to see, some people working with other people that they might not get to work with in the actual comic books or in any of the other programs. Plus, you got to see some subtle um, hints of stuff that you may have got to have seen down the line, which they never followed up on, i.e. the Lex Luthor being with Deathstroke in this as well. The first time that I'd seen those two characters together at that point. Obviously, we got to see them down the line in the post credits, didn't we, for the Batman film, or what was
it
going
was
to
the
be
Justice League.
it? Well, it was going to be the original Batman film, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was intended.
It was going to be Deathstroke, and obviously we've spoken at length about what that could be. But yeah, there were some subtle things, some nice little future, what do they call it, foreshadowing, some future foreshadowing in this that was really good, as long as you could see through what was going on. But from about 15 minutes into this, it turns into what can only be described as just a bizarro world version of anything that you would know of the Justice League. So just remember, when you are watching this, you're not actually watching a Justice League film. You're watching a film that features some version of the characters that are involved with the Justice League characters. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
These are, for me, this is not the Justice League. There's no form of the Justice League in this.
no, no. Well, Flashpoints, before we get started talking about the movie, Flashpoints is a story arc that involved Barry Allen running fast back in time. So he essentially runs back to the past to save his mum from being murdered. And I mean, they've done little things like this before. I mean, I've read a few stories before where Flash ran so fast he broke time and he met Jay Garrick from the 1940s. They've done little things like this before, but this was the first time that, Barry Allen running back in time to the past had devastating consequences. So he runs back in time, saves his mum, but at the same time, as he breaks time, he pretty much alters the timeline, which is a big thing they do in the Arrowverse show. Obviously, this film came out just about a year before the Flash TV series came out. So obviously, people who've watched the Arrowverse show, who have watched the movie, you are going to see some similarities. But Barry Allen running back to the past pretty much alters time. So there's a different Batman, there's a different Aquaman, there's a different Wonder Woman. There's essentially, like as you say, there's like different versions of DC heroes. So they're not going to be quite the same heroes you know from before. So everything is just turned upside down, and Barry has essentially got to try and fix things before it's too late. But they did quite a good job with this. I mean, we'll talk about it as we go along, but the whole running back in time to change the past, it just seemed a bit weird, which we'll get into in a moment. Just the way it was executed here was just very, very odd. It's very different to how the Arrowverse show handled that. So, with that all said, we're going to get straight into it. We're going to start talking about Justice League, the Flashpoint Paradox. So, this starts off with Barry Allen at his mother's grave, and we see Iris. And before we get to that, we see a flashback of Barry Allen as a kid with his mum in the middle of nowhere trying to have their car fixed. So, what was your thoughts on this opening scene, Rex?
To be honest, at first, obviously watching it at first, I had no idea what was going on. I just knew that this was a scene set within, a time before Barry became the Flash. Obviously, I know he's not the Flash at this point. So I thought it was just, expose or whatever, or this was going to be their version of how Barry's mum obviously was killed or whatever. But it was quite weird. It was almost like we were just getting introduced to the character for the sake of being introduced to the character that was Barry Allen. Like, hey guys, this is Barry Allen. He's going to turn into the Flash at some point in the future. That's and I apologize if that's negative, but that's just as far as this opening scene was. It was to just give you the Bruce Wayne's parents getting killed, Flash's mom getting killed. We know that half of the comic book world is linked to tragic events and situations of radiation and gamma radiation or some kind of cosmic radiation. We know how these things work. For me, this was completely unnecessary. If you know who the Flash is, why did we need this 4 or 5 minutes of whatever, or 3.5 minutes of whatever that was? It should have just literally started with the graveyard scene with Iris and Barry.
I kind of felt that the opening scene of this movie, where you see Barry as a kid, it didn't really feel like an opening for a movie. It just kind of like felt like an opening for an episode of like an animated series, like maybe like a Justice League animated series, or maybe like Young Justice. It kind of felt like that to me. I mean, as you say, I completely agree with you. This scene with Barry as a kid was unnecessary. I don't think this was needed. Maybe they could have had this in the middle.
It just felt to me like it was literally like the producers were like, well, what happens if people don't know who the Flash is apart from just the guy in the red suit who can run fast? What happens if they don't know who Barry Allen is? We've got to introduce this, for the nerds out there, for the people that actually are aware this is Barry Allen, he's going to become the Flash. This, click on to the next thing. For the people that are unaware of who Barry Allen is and who the Flash may or may not be, this is a hint to who he will be and what it will be. It's just literally condensed into like 2.5 minutes. It was like the origin story of the Flash, the mom getting killed. Most Batman films have featured that, haven't they? It's almost like we can't get away from the Uncle Ben, Bruce Wayne's parents, and of course the Flash's mom being killed. And I'm sure that there is other characters, obviously, that I can't think of right now, but I'm sure that there is origin stories that are featured like this, or like I said previously, the radiation explosion. It's just, I feel like this was just in there for that reason, bar nothing else.
Yeah, this definitely felt more like just a filler, just to kill about a couple of minutes of time. It just had no place, really. Maybe they could have put this in the middle when Barry was remembering what had happened, but yeah, this just felt like a very odd way to start off a DC animated movie, especially as we've talked previously about how epic DC animated movies kick off. They just kick off with a big bang, but this one just felt like, okay. Barry as a kid, I guess. So we cut to the present, and Barry, of course, is blaming himself that, oh, if I'd got there sooner, if I just got there a bit faster, maybe I could have saved her, which is obviously going to be setting up for what this film is going to be all about. And then Barry gets a call that the Rogues, which are a group of villains of Flash's enemies, are trying to rob the Flash Museum. So we essentially get here Captain Cold, Captain Boomerang, Heatwave, Mirror Master, and Top. Do you think this could have been better as an opening instead of the one we got?
Yeah, it definitely could have. I mean, I said it to you before we even started talking, to have this scene as the opening to any movie when you are being told that this is the full-fledged, you know, early, maybe 20s, mid-20s version of the Flash. Bearing on mind that if you know who the Flash is, you know that somewhere a few years, 5 or 6 years after his mum is killed, he has this thing that turns him into the Flash, etc. So you know that at this stage he's been the Flash for a considerable amount of time. He looked really weak in this opening scene. He looked really stupid, to be honest. Like,
Yeah.
the Flash should never ever be stopped with projectiles, things that explode, things like gas, stuff like that should never be able to prevent him unless they've already set a pre-trap before, you know, he starts off and starts running or whatever. His speed is so quick that, remember, that everything that he's seeing makes the room like milliseconds of what's actually happening. You could think of something and he's already on the move before you've even started to do what you're doing. That's how quick that the Flash is supposed to be, yeah? And we're being shown here that he can be easily distracted by exploding what looked to me like glockenspiels or some kind of toy. Or did anyone else, honestly, write in the comment section below? I don't know, one of the characters looked like he threw some kind, I think he was the toy maker, wasn't he?
Yeah, he's
Yeah,
Top. He had like those spinning tops that
yeah,
explode.
like he's some version. He was in one of the, he was in the Flash series, I think he was, as somebody else.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah,
he throws
he
some kind of like
was.
spinning spinners, like whatever they are, and they explode. But the Flash should never get hit with them.
No.
It made him look kind of weak. But then, of course, we get an immediate answer to why he is being outmatched by these rogues, and that's because, of course, straight away we're going to need help from other people. And this is where we get an introduction to the other characters. Do you want to name some of these other characters that show up almost immediately as the film starts?
Well, the Flash villains, as I mentioned earlier, we get Captain Cold, Captain Boomerang, Heatwave, Mirror Master, and Top, and they're led by Eobard Thawne. Now, Eobard Thawne, everybody knows he's the Reverse Flash, but here, and this is one issue that I'm going to nitpick here, he's addressed as Professor Zoom. Now, obviously, some people are going to think, well, that is the Reverse Flash. Depending on what you read, really, Eobard Thawne is the Reverse Flash, and Professor Zoom was Hunter Zolomon. So when
Yeah.
this happened, I thought, well, hang on a minute. If he's Eobard Thawne, why is he not called Reverse Flash? Why Professor Zoom's the other guy? It just didn't really make sense to me.
It's definitely Hunter Zolomon that was the Professor Zoom. Yeah,
Yes.
Professor Zoom. But that's all. That's all like before the Reverse Flash becomes the Reverse Flash, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
in the
Zoom was
timeline or whatever.
first. I believe
Zoom
Zoom
was
was first.
Flash's. Zoom was Flash's first, um,
Evil Speedster.
yeah, like the guy who went up against the Flash, and he first wore a yellow suit, which
Yes.
maybe they just tried to combine the two. I think it's to do with Professor Zoom why the Reverse Flash wore yellow as well, because it's the
They
complete
both wore
reverse of the
yellow.
Flash.
In the
Yes,
comics, they both wore yellow.
the
And they're both
complete
the
reverse of
same
the
as
Flash.
well.
But I do agree though, to call, even the TV show dealt with this. It got kind of convoluted, you know, towards the end of it. But even the TV show dealt with this, that, you know, Eobard Thawne is the Reverse Flash and Hunter Zolomon is the Professor Zoom.
Yes.
It's a
They got that.
version of the Reverse Flash. Clearly, obviously, this guy is everything, but there's something slightly different and off about Professor Zoom more than the Reverse Flash. Professor Zoom has got more of like a Jekyll and a Hyde vibe to him as well, like where he's completely unhinged when
Yeah.
he's, you know, doing the speedster thing.
Well, with Reverse Flash, the proper Reverse Flash, Reverse Flash is like, he's supposed to be like the fastest man, not the fastest man alive, but the fastest man ever. Very smart, always got a plan, loves making Barry's life a living hell just because he can do it. With the Professor Zoom character, or at least this version that they went with, as you say, he's very unhinged. He's very,
Professor
very
Zoom
unhinged.
was a villain of just villain proportions that had the same abilities as Barry Allen.
Yeah,
The Reverse Flash always comes across to me as the guy who he is just like, he doesn't care about, like even in where they've manipulated it with certain versions of him in Legends of Tomorrow and obviously the Arrow and Flash. Like they've made it so he's more of just a straight up villain. Now, I'm sure in the comic books he did villain stuff, but the way that I was shown the Reverse Flash is like he just wants to take on the Flash. He doesn't care about anybody else. Doesn't care about doing other stuff. He will just try to destroy the Flash, and thus in time gone by, because he's not fast enough and strong enough to take on the Flash, he then goes out and gets other and teams up with other. Because remember, this is the whole Sinister Six vibe to these characters of the
it
Rogues
was.
Gallery, where they all individually try to take on the Flash. They wouldn't work with each other necessarily, but it becomes where they've been defeated so many times by the Scarlet Speedster that they, in the end, they end up saying, well, you know what? The enemy of my enemy is my friend. It's the whole situation of that. It's not that they already work together. Like maybe some of them did work together. I think, Captain Cold and because you got to remember that there's different versions of this Rogues team as well as
Yeah, there
time
is.
goes on with the Flash. So sometimes Reverse Flash is not even involved with these people. So, this version of it is the case of Reverse Flash keeps being outdone. He's not faster than the Flash. His whole mentality, which is what would become the Professor Zoom part of it, which is the insanity part, is on the edge. And he decides, you know what, I'm going to reach out to some other villains and see if they can help me against this Flash guy. And we can obviously see from the very start of this, the Flash isn't just equipped to take on all of these guys at the same time. He needs help to take on all of these people. He can take them on one by one very easily, very cockily and very arrogant wise. Like he will just be arrogant after with some kind of saying or whatever after he's captured them. Like, like we see in the Arrowverse version of the Flash, he'll say something witty after, even though he's gone through hell mentally trying to lead to
Yeah.
a result or whatever. But the Flash always overcomes. But in this, you can clearly see that there is a version of there is no success against this Rogues team without the help of the other people. That's how we are immediately shown in this film. Like whatever, I mean, bearing in mind, and this is the last thing I'll say about this. This first opening 10 minutes has absolutely zero to do with the actual film that we're about to watch.
No, yes, in a way.
This is just a straight look at what the Flash actually is. This is what I mean. This is still part of the opening part of the film. I could have understood this bit because it shows you who the Flash is and what his abilities are and what he's capable of. Although, as I said at the start of the rant, very weak-looking version of the Flash, if I'm honest. But it was unnecessary because the rest of the film has absolutely nothing to do. We literally, within the end of this scene, the whole film turns into this Bizarro World version because of the Flash obviously running so fast.
Well, I mean, this opening scene, like you say, the first 10 minutes, this easily could have been, one of those DC showcase shorts that you would get. Like you get like little mini shorts for like 7 or 8 minutes or maybe 10 minutes. This is what it felt like. It just felt like, well, this doesn't really feel like what we're about to see. This just feels like this could have been a short that ties into this, because this did feel like a showcase. It's like, right, this is the Flash. He's Barry Allen. He's fast. This is what his powers are, and these are his bad guys. As I said, this just felt more like a 8 or 10 minute short. This didn't really feel like part of the movie. One of the things I did like about this scene, though, was Zoom planted 25th century technology in the form of a bomb on the Flash's body, but he also set it all up on the other members of the Rogues. Because, clearly, as you say, Professor Zoom doesn't care about these guys. It's just like what you said before, the whole Sinister Six vibe. We don't like each other. We're not friends. We've been defeated by this guy, but we're all going to work together. But I'm running the show. So it's essentially almost like the Kingpin when he brought all the Spider-Man villains together. Goes, yeah, you can all defeat the hero, but just remember, I'm in charge. So that kind of felt like that. And this is where we would get the Justice League all get involved, albeit in like very small cameo roles. What was your thoughts on all of the Justice League members trying to disarm Zoom's bombs? What did you think of this?
Like I said, I thought it was ridiculous. I thought this was just so that these characters could be in the film. Like, honestly, what does, like, the Green Lantern, one of the most powerful characters that we still, they knew that they messed up the film royally before this, but yet rather than having this film with the Justice League, finger quote, and having shown what Aquaman could do, what Hal Jordan could do, along with the Flash, Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman. I think Captain Atom's here somewhere as well. Or
Yeah,
he
he's
was
in
on
it as well.
the team. Is he in the Justice League or is he on the other side? I don't know where he is. He's in this
Yeah,
somewhere.
he's there. He's there very briefly for about a couple of minutes.
But either way, it's just like this is a cameo of almost ridiculous proportions, or of ridiculous proportions. Like, we need to disarm these bombs, but yeah, it feels to me like Superman could just go and grab all 6 of these bombs and just hold them in his hand and let them explode. Or Hal could just take all 6 of the people up to the sky, take the things off, and then let them fall into. It was such a, and I'm gonna say this, like, this was like a Power Rangers-esque showing of the Justice League, almost like, oh, they've built this Avengers team. We need to show this team working as a team, and this was what they came up with. Like you said, this felt like a short. It felt like it was like a 10-minute introduction to what the Justice League is and could be, and give them a little mission or whatever, and then we're going to get a Justice League series coming up. This, I honestly, I have no idea what was going on with this scene, especially when you sat there. Like, honestly, 15 minutes later, I sat there and I was like, what was all that at the start about with those bombs? Like, that was nothing to do with this. Like, that was absolutely nothing to do with this. Apart from, like I say, immediately, the next thing you see after this scene ends, of course, Barry's then in a different dimension or whatever. Because it's really cheesy how they disarm the bombs, to be honest. The way that they make it seem like it's going to be, like, you'd have thought that this would have been the whole plot of the movie, and this, we're going to get more characters that are going to have to come in and save the day and do other things. Things are happening elsewhere and whatever else. But it's almost like this scene is just literally like the introduction of characters. We didn't need this. Like, I could understand this being in a 1993 version of a Justice League movie because no one was really that aware that these people are all teamed up, yeah. But this was in 2013. This was years after we were all aware of who Batman, Superman, you know, the Flash, like all these. Even if you didn't know that much about the individual characters, you knew for a fact that who they were. We were being showed like, oh, this is what their ability is. No, we already know this. We've had a bad. Most of these characters, apart from the Flash, have had a bad movie. Never mind an actual movie. They've had a bad movie.
I know.
Like, why are we trying to show what the Green Lantern can and can't do? We already failed at that before in the actual live action, you know, heavy budget movie. But yeah, let's move on and let's move to the next scene, because as I said, this was where this actual film started here. You know what I mean? Like, the real film starts now.
So after we get classic taunting from Zoom, and Barry essentially runs off, and we see him running really fast, and then that's pretty much, we're getting the proper movie now, and Barry Allen wakes up in his office and he sees things are different. No Justice League, Speed's gone, his mother is alive, and Iris is married to someone else. So the interesting thing about this is what I wanted to mention to you, like when Barry runs back in time, it just felt really weird because he's running, but it doesn't look like anything happens. It's like, oh, mission's done, off I go. And then he wakes up, it's like you don't see anything epic happen. You don't like see the screen going weird, or you don't see anything. It just wakes up and it's normal. I mean, what was your thoughts on this? It just felt very weird.
Yeah, there was clearly no indication of, do you know what I mean? Like, there was something happening here. We literally just, like I said, went from the 10-minute short, 12-minute short of this is who the Flash was when he was a kid. This is who he is now. Rogues Gallery. So that means that obviously he must have all fought all these people before. Justice League. We get the introduction to all of the characters. Then immediately, like I said, once that scene ends, it's almost like this film was 15 minutes shorter, and then they just threw that opening scene in to give us an introduction to the characters, but we weren't supposed to do what we're doing now and massively read into, well, that actually feels like that was filmed in a completely different movie. Like the first 15 minutes feels like that was a Justice League film, and the next hour and 10 minutes or whatever feels like this was a Flash film featuring, Bizarro World. There was clearly no indication that we were entering a different world. The first indication we got of that was where we realized that Batman wasn't Bruce, it was somebody else.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Just really felt weird, just felt very off. Now, the changes that have been made due to Barry going back to the past is Aquaman and Wonder Woman are at war with each other, so it's essentially Atlantis versus Themyscira. We have Cyborg working for the government, and we see Batman running around patrolling Gotham, but it's not Bruce Wayne, it's Thomas Wayne. What was your thoughts on the Thomas Wayne version of Batman?
Very, very dark, very, very just different version of Batman. You could clearly see that they wanted to make this clear that this is not Bruce Wayne. This is the consequences of the difference between, what we know as with Batman being Batman, because of his origin story. This is the consequence of a completely different alternative timeline where, Thomas Wayne was the one who died, and thus then leaving him as the one who became the, vigilante and the Dark Knight, etc. This is a really dark version of the Dark Knight as well. Let's be perfectly honest.
Yeah, definitely. Essentially, what happens in this timeline is instead of Thomas and Martha Wayne getting murdered, Bruce Wayne ends up getting shot, and we see Martha becomes the Joker, and Thomas Wayne becomes, as you say, this dark, bitter, vengeful Batman who actually uses guns, and we see him go after who is essentially supposed to be like a version of Harley Quinn, and you can see that okay, this is not Bruce Wayne. This is a different kind of Batman, and he just essentially just drops her off a 10-foot high building. And I remember watching this thinking, okay, Bruce would never do that. I mean, Bruce probably would, but then he'll just shoot the grapple gun and pull him back up and say, right, let's try this again. Tell me what I know. But this Batman's like, yeah, I don't care. I'm just gonna throw her off the building. Big deal. And we see Cyborg is trying to convince Batman to join his team, but of course, this Batman is not having any part of it. I thought this Batman was probably one of the highlights of this movie. I mean, it was something we don't really get to see often. I mean, they've done things like this in the comics, like a Thomas Wayne Batman, but this is the first time we've actually seen it in animation, and I thought they did quite a good job with this. I mean, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because this was such an alternative version of Batman that
Yeah,
you can't really look at this as Batman, if you know what I mean. Like, there was no similarities apart from the suit and the fact that this guy was, vengeance. This was vengeance. Like, this was less Batman, and this was more just what complete vengeance is. But yeah, there was an interesting dynamic here. Like I said, very interesting. Just looking at Thomas and the whole, like you say, I mean, the interesting part for me, more than Thomas being Batman, was the Martha being the Joker thing. Like, we didn't really get a much of a follow up on that, did we? But
no, we
you
should
know
have
what I
done.
mean? Like, that would have been interesting. But yeah, this was Bizarro World. At this point, I was just trying to get my head around the changes, knowing that there was going to be more changes going to be coming up as the film progressed.
Well, one thing that pretty much remains the same, although slightly altered, is Hal Jordan is still the test pilot, but instead of testing the plane like he did in his origin story, he's essentially assigned to fly an alien ship to blow up Atlantis. I don't know really. This scene with Hal Jordan to me just felt out of place in his altered timeline because we don't really see much of Hal Jordan in this movie, other than we got what we got at the beginning with the Green Lantern cameo, and we essentially see him here again. I don't know really. I mean, do you felt this scene with Hal Jordan just felt a bit out of place? Do you think it was not needed?
Unnecessary character. I didn't need this part of the plot. It had absolutely no bearing on the story whatsoever. He didn't even manage to even follow up with his mission. He never became the Green Lantern as part of this version of the story. There were multiple characters that were in this that are side characters in the Justice League solo movies, etc., like Lois Lane and Steve Trevor. I don't know if you got the hint of Steve Trevor being in this, but
Yeah,
he
he
was
was
in
in this
this.
one.
He was in this, a much different version of Steve Trevor. But yeah, you got all these side characters, but Hal Jordan is actually the Green Lantern. So it's like, right, let's see how they actually portray one of their actual characters. Not very well.
No, they
Still the
didn't.
pilot and still all that, but failed at the job, didn't he? By basically, we'll get to that later in the movie, but basically failed. But you've just even got to even try to even explain and understand this world where Aquaman and Wonder Woman are not necessarily on each other's side. They're on opposite sides, but they're both not on the side that Batman's on, which is like, this is basically a three-way dance of power.
Yeah, more or less, really. So we see here that Barry realizes that things are not quite what they seem, and we see Barry visits Wayne Manor, and he learns that Bruce Wayne isn't here; it's actually Thomas Wayne. This for me was actually a very good scene, because Thomas Wayne, you can see that he's lost a lot, as we touched upon earlier, and he doesn't essentially believe Barry. I mean, what was your thoughts on this scene, Thomas Wayne, Batman meeting Barry Allen?
Well, you immediately got an introduction to the fact that, like I said, this is definitely not any version of Bruce Wayne. Like, it's supposed to be, right. Remember, this Bruce Wayne might not know Barry Allen because he's in a different place. No, this is not even Bruce Wayne A. So this guy has never met Barry Allen, never in any world would have met Barry Allen. You got to remember that these two would have never crossed paths in any version that has been explored so far. And Thomas Wayne deals with him how Batman would deal with a stranger entering the Bat cave. How the hell did you get in here? A, what are you doing here? B, and before the answers even get answered, it's clearly obvious that you're going to get some kind of violence, which we did. This guy does not hesitate. Very dark version, very affected version of Thomas Wayne slash Batman. Different to see, but this was one of the better scenes. This did more to introduce you to the bizarro world that we were in than the starting part of the movie did to introduce you to the characters.
Yeah. And in this scene, which, is one of the better scenes, as you say, this Batman, he almost like takes pleasure in torturing people. And you see here, he's more or less trying to break Barry's fingers. This was definitely very dark. And as I said to you before, before we started this, I do feel maybe this movie should have been R-rated because there are some scenes here that are quite I wouldn't say as horrific as something like Under the Red Hood, but there was just some scenes here you think, wow, why is this not a 15 or an R-rated of sorts? But yeah, this was definitely like very bizarre, as you say, bizarro sort of world. And Thomas Wayne's like breaking Barry's fingers, and eventually we see Barry convince this Batman that he's from an alternate reality where Bruce, he's still alive, and he explains to him that his son's still alive, and obviously Thomas Wayne goes on to explain about what happened, and this was one of the better scenes, I would say. And what was your thoughts on Thomas Wayne having like the Joker card on his wall, all covered in blood? What was your thoughts on that moment?
Well, there was multiple of them, wasn't there? If you
There
watched it,
was, yeah, but
there
that was the
was
main
more,
one.
meaning that they're obviously, and if you looked at the different shape of some of them, they'd obviously been shot with bullets and other stuff like that. You clearly see that this had been from multiple times that people had died, etc., etc., etc. And like I
Yeah,
said, I totally agree with you with the darker version of Thomas Wayne and Batman thus being a darker version of Batman. It's just because, you know, being thrust into a world like this, you just don't know what you're getting. Like
Yeah.
at this point, I have to speak from the way what I was watching, which was right. This is, you know, like I say, Bizarro world. What we're seeing here is a much different version of these characters, and you know, even though there's still some humanity left inside of Thomas Wayne, like there would be with Bruce, and you know, Barry manages to get what he wants, which is to try to emulate the whole lightning storm. Although we do get the reveal that his suit is yellow in this world, like it's
Yeah.
been clearly designed. But yeah, if you look, in fact, it's not even a Joker card, it's different cards, isn't it? But one of the cards next to the Joker card that's covered in blood is a number 2. And that's got like part of it missing where you can clearly see it's been like shot off or whatever. Like, I don't know what the symbolization of that board is, but it's clearly obviously to do with the Joker. And obviously then, obviously down the line, we find out who the Joker is in this world.
Yeah, it turns out to be Martha Wayne. Now, in this scene where Barry is trying to get his speed back, this was quite horrific. You know, you're essentially trying to get yourself electric shocked to try and get your powers back. You know, I thought this was quite a clever scene, but I thought it would have been a little bit different to what I was expecting. I mean, what did you think of that? You know, how he got his powers back.
You would have expected it to have been a one-time and done thing, but he did end up with. I wouldn't have minded him seeing him with the burns and that, because obviously when you get the CW program and then other versions of it, and I'm sure the film as well, you might not get to see that horrific side of it. But let's be fair, no matter what you are, and it's always been hinted upon, they were shocked that he could survive from the lightning strike, because not just because of the damage to him, it's vital organs and stuff like that that have been shaken up by obviously the lightning strike. Like even in the CW version of it, they hinted upon the fact that, you know, it's a miracle that he's still moving and breathing and stuff like that. But we didn't get to see anything, you know, too graphic.
No,
The CW,
no.
you just knew it was a suspension of belief that in your mind you could say, right, he's definitely been struck by lightning, he's not going to be thingy. But in this, you got to see the full, you know, damage of what would happen to a human skin and body. He was burnt up, like, you know, he was very, very burnt up.
Yeah, it was quite a horrific scene.
Looking a bit like a Darkman version of what's it called, of the Flash.
I know it was quite horrific, and you know the burns after he got struck by lightning, you know, was a bit graphic for me for a cartoon. I thought, wow, okay, this is quite a horrific scene, but you know, it was quite clever how it was well executed.
It's definitely executed well, especially like the fact that he's not dead, but he's still alive, meaning that he's got his body's definitely got the thingy to survive it. So, you know, like his body's definitely got the, I don't know, just the ability to withstand whatever he's about to do. So it's bound to think that he's going to test it again, and obviously that's what he does. But just even the first version of it, it's like it was weird, because it was like, how the hell would he have known how to completely and utterly replicate what was in that room at the time, all of the chemicals? It would have just been like, you would have had to have replicated how those chemicals would have fallen, how they would have interacted with the room and the lightning. Like, it would have been, in real reality, it would have been impossible, I feel, to have completely replicated that lightning strike outside of the room that he already got struck by lightning in. It's just a case of him strapping himself to a chair like he did and being struck by lightning. I think it's a bit more like, if that was part of the origin story, that somebody had strapped him to a chair as Barry Allen and then he got struck by lightning and became the Flash, then I'd accept it. But we know that that's not what happened. It happened in an experimental lab. So just strapping a few chemical to the side of a chair, I don't know if that would have replicated it, but it was more what you were supposed to take from the scene. And obviously we got to see how, you know, just even from Thomas Wayne's perspective, like, well, you know what, dude, if you're going to do this to yourself, who am I to stop you? Let's see where we get here.
Yeah, Thomas Wayne's attitude. He's like, okay, well, if you want to fry yourself, be my guest. I'm not responsible, but I did warn you.
He engulfs himself in flames where Thomas Wayne, where Batman has to put him out. from
Yeah.
being on fire. He literally sets himself on fire.
Jeez, I know it's quite horrific that was. Now, this next scene coming up here, we get Steve Trevor, who we know as Wonder Woman's companion, and we see here he's interrogated and captured by the Amazons and killed by Wonder Woman. Now, as we mentioned earlier, the Atlanteans and the Amazons, they're at war with each other. So obviously, Steve Trevor is the casualty of that war. What was your thoughts on Steve Trevor's brief cameo here? Do you think it was needed or not really?
Wasn't really needed, but it was nice because of the fact that it was the pre-Wonder Woman film version of Steve, meaning he was clearly a 60, 70-year-old man. This would have been set, early 90s, mid 90s. It was clearly a 60, 70-year-old man at that stage, an older man or whatever. Yeah, like, grey hair, white hair in the cartoon or whatever. He's clearly an older version of Steve Trevor, not the Steve Trevor that we knew that helped Wonder Woman. Bearing in mind, remember he helped her in when he was mid-20s or whatever in the 1940s. So this was 50 years on from that timeline there. And he was a
Yeah.
much older, like, operative version, like less war and soldier, but more of like an operative, like sort of special forces version of Steve Trevor. I didn't like how he was immediately like, disposed of basically, but at the same time, it was a subtle hint to this is how far removed that Diana is from what she was before because of, like basically because of, like Steve Trevor. I mean, I don't really know how to explain like the whole premise of the different characters because it's difficult because I can sit here and talk about everything I know about Steve Trevor, but none of that is this Steve Trevor character, which is the reason why I understand the whole Flashpoint Paradox stuff, but it's at this point in the movie where it started to become like, right, so we're now bringing in side characters that aren't the same side characters, that are different characters, but we're supposed to still look at them as in, oh, well, this is, Steve Trevor, but then Steve Trevor is immediately interrogated and eliminated by a woman that doesn't know him, but yet in our version of it, she's the woman that loves him. It's
Yeah.
very, very confusing at this stage. I think we're only shown this scene to separate the Wonder Woman that we know from this version of Diana.
Yeah, this is just pretty much their way of telling you that this is not the Diana you know. This is a completely different version of Diana. I suppose, in a way, having Steve Trevor, I mean, it didn't really add much to it. I would have liked to have maybe seen Steve Trevor have a bit more of a part, maybe not a big part, but just maybe like a bit more than just one scene. I mean, this did feel like just a throwaway scene. It just didn't really add much to it other than just for the sake of shock value. But, what can you do really? And we also get to see Deathstroke and Lex Luthor work together. Now, as we said before, that Deathstroke and Lex Luthor have met each other in the Justice League live action movie, which was essentially to set up for a Batman movie that we never got. But it's interesting to see Deathstroke and Lex Luthor in animation working together because I don't think we ever got to see this, did we?
No, I don't think we did, apart from that one scene in the Justice League post credits. And also, if you look at this as well, there are multiple characters that would have been enemies of Aquaman in our version of the Aquaman world that were working with Aquaman.
Well, like Black Manta, he was in this scene.
That's the first one that I noticed, and then obviously I just assumed that some of the other ones were either Atlanteans that would have eventually have turned on Aquaman, or they were people who would have been by his side, thus would be by his side anyway. But I'm sure the person who we know as his brother, he was also fighting by his side as well, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. The only thing with this scene, though, with Deathstroke and Lex Luthor, I mean, we got to see them, but they were just taken out very quickly. I was really not happy about that. It's just
Some other characters as well that were part of this scene that they weren't named or anything like that, but they were definitely random standalone hooded and masked DC, characters, comic book characters that were just shot and killed almost instantly as this scene developed. Like I said, there was people whirling around water on the Atlantean side and flinging laser beams and stuff around, and all of a sudden, whoever these rebel forces were with Lex Luthor and Deathstroke, it ended up literally just being Lex Luthor and Deathstroke taking on, whatever this Atlantean army was.
Yeah, and they pretty much got killed off here, didn't they?
There was quite a few unnamed characters here, including them. Like, it was not like they were made any sort of, not like they were made an example of or stood out in the film. It was literally just a 2-minute scene where if you know who Lex Luthor is, and if you know who Deathstroke is, the only way that a lot of people would have even known who Deathstroke was is when he pulls down his mask and you get to see the two different sides to his mask. Before that, he could have just been any guy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it was good to see them, but again, it was another scene where you essentially bring in two characters just for the sake of it, and you don't really do much with them. So they're more or less just taken out by Aquaman's forces, and they're powered by the captive Captain Atom. So we also get back to the Batcave, and we see Barry is starting to have some sort of seizure as the memories are changing, and we see Barry begs Thomas Wayne Batman in trying to attempt to recreate the lightning storm that made him the Flash, and we see that it succeeds and Barry's powers are restored. Do you think this was well executed, or what was your thoughts on this?
Well, this is what I expected to see in the first place, like just one and done. Let's get it over and done with and get
Yeah,
the Flash back to being the Flash in this series. You know what I mean? In this movie, should I say? I thought it was executed well. I thought it was we'd already had the warning, hadn't we, of the dangers of what lightning can do. Yeah. And then
yeah,
of course this time, of course, we got the second example, which was, oh well, if you sit in the right place with the right type of lightning and the right type of chemicals, then it will do something like this. Now I know that I'm making jokes of it, but it pretty much was just a perfect way of emulating the Flash's situation, what he went through before when he became the Flash. So we got exactly what we got out of this scene, exactly what we were supposed to get out of it.
yeah, yeah. It pretty much did what it said on the tin. Really, there's not really much else you can say. And Barry learns that Eobard Thawne, Professor Zoom, is using the Speed Force, but Barry learns that he can't travel through time yet. So we're going to essentially here see Barry and Thomas Wayne try and look for allies to try and fix things. Now, this is where we learn that Superman has crash landed here on Earth just the same way as he did before, but instead of the Kents finding him, he's taken in as a prisoner of the US government. And what we see here is Superman's basically, he's a skinny wretch, isn't he?
Yeah, I'd also like to mention that I do think that there is an appearance randomly from Clayface in that fight between Lex Luthor and Deathstroke.
There was a cameo from
Multiple
Clayface.
characters in that just get killed immediately in that scene. But yeah, as we progress through the film,
Yeah, we essentially see Barry and Thomas are trying to look for people to help them fix things, and we see Superman lands here on Earth just the same way as he did when we first see him, but instead of being found by the Kents, he's taken in by the US governments. And Superman is pretty much a skinny wretch.
the
Yeah.
linking between Aquaman and Wonder Woman,
Ah,
there is
yes.
some kind of agreement between them. And then I think Wonder Woman, after having sex with Aquaman, then she kills
Mira.
Mira, doesn't she? She kills
Yes.
the Queen of Atlantis,
This
and
is pretty much how this war starts, really.
yeah, and that's how their war started. But then it's not really even like it's not. What is it? Just brushed over that. So why did he blatantly cheat on his wife with another woman? Why his wife was still there? That made absolutely no sense whatsoever. Especially when you've already had her, Diana, kill her love interest, what we know has always been her love interest, and obviously Superman or any of them are not her love interest in this. So it's a bit strange. But I thought that we would have to literally just mention that scene before we get any further. But yeah, you know, this is how we get the war on basically on three fronts, where, you know, you've got your Batman and the world, the actual world, then you've got the Atlanteans, and then you've got the Amazonians. So
Yeah.
it's basically a three-way war. But yeah, then we get the Flash second attempt, and then we get the Flash actually rekindling his speed, etc., like that. And then, because we didn't mention anything really to do with the fact that the Flash then, the Speed Force returns to the Flash. You did say that at the same time Zoom's using it, like Flash realized that he can't access the whole Speed Force because he's having to share it with somebody else. So that's how we find out that he has realized that Zoom is about, or they call it Zoom, but it's clearly just the same Reverse Flash that we had before. You know what I mean? Like in this world, obviously it's Zoom. It's just to bring in the other characters. But yeah, after that happens obviously after, you know, the second experiment. It's here where we get the Hal Jordan scene, where Hal Jordan is going to pilot the spaceship, and he even gets a look at one of the Lantern Corps members,
That's
who's,
the same guy who gave him his ring as well.
yeah, but obviously in this he hasn't been given the ring or anything like that. Like, I assume that what we're seeing here, if this was to branch off into the Green Lantern's origin story or whatever, in this world, this being that's in this cage would then wake up potentially to help him or to save him or whatever. You know, I don't know how we're going to work, but in the real Hal Jordan story, that alien, I'm sure, like you said, gives him the ring, doesn't he?
Yeah, yeah, he pretty much does. He pretty much orders the ring to find someone to be the successor of the Green Lantern, and it turns out to be Hal Jordan. But this obviously doesn't play into this altered timeline. So we also see, Superman is pretty much powerless. Really, he hasn't really got full power, and he's
They meet up with Cyborg first, don't they? The Flash
yeah,
and Batman meet up with Cyborg, and obviously at first Barry's like, Victor, you look different, you sound different. Yeah, that's because he is actually Killmonger from the Black Panther, if you don't know. No, I'm only joking. It's the same guy, same voice. But yeah, either way, we get that scene where the Flash meets this version of Cyborg, and then this is where they talk about the crash in Metropolis, etc. Because obviously Flash knows of Superman on his world, and Thomas Wayne, Batman, says there's no such human being. I've said there's no such human being as that person here. But then it turns out that obviously, like you say, that there was, and he crashed in Metropolis instead of crashing in Smallville.
yeah, he was
Is
taken
that
in
not
pretty
right?
much by the
Yeah.
U.S. government.
Like there was a big crater, wasn't there? Like a meteor crater in
Yeah,
Metropolis. And obviously Barry's like, are you sure that there's no thingy? And then that's where they ask Cyborg to scan and look at classified store, and then they go searching, and that's where they obviously look in the right places, and they come across a very, very different version of, I mean, could you even call this Superman?
no, I would probably say it's just more or less Kal-El, really.
It's just Kal-El, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, he's not even Clark. He doesn't even know his name would be Clark because he's not been brought up by the Kents. Meaning
No.
he's not Clark Kent. He's a nameless Kryptonian being on this planet.
Yeah, and he's not actually at full power either. So, everyone is so used to seeing Superman as this, powerhouse muscle guy. He's pretty much just a skinny wretch, really. He's
But there
very,
was
very,
also some subtle things that what he'd been being used for.
yes.
Did you see what was taking place as they led into the underground like facility that they found him in? Did you see what was taking place in the cages and in the jars and stuff like that? Like there was like experiments and stuff like that, like failed dead like hybrid experiments where
You
they'd
see,
obviously
like,
tried to bond him with animals and other creatures and stuff like that to see what they could get out of him.
yeah,
It
that was
basically,
quite disturbing. That was always,
yeah, it's basically, this version of Superman was basically being used as like a lab rat.
yeah, it's quite
Very similar to the X-Men situation with Stryker and that, like in their version of
X
it,
program.
obviously. Yeah, like Stryker was using the mutant gene, wasn't he, to tried to enhance humans and not realizing that it was actually something genetic that, you know, if you give one mutant like a Wolverine who's got a healing factor, you know, bones and a skeleton that's made of something that's impenetrable, it automatically actually translates that this guy actually can't be killed. For that period of his life, he was basically invincible.
Yeah.
Because even when he was where he could just keep regenerating and healing, he could take bullets and stuff like that, but he'd obviously he'd obviously have to re-heal and take time off to re-heal. Even if he could heal quickly, he'd obviously get hurt enough where he'd have to take some time off. Whereas when he got the adamantium shell, it just literally was just nothing was going to penetrate his skeleton, so it would just be a skin wound, a flesh wound, heal immediately, get back to normal. Nothing, no lead poisoning, no nothing like that, because it can't get inside of his bones. It can't do anything like that to him, and he can practically just cut off chunks of his skin, pull out the bullet, and then re-heal. I think there was an element of you know, the X-Men sort of dark, the experimental in this facility, like where, you know, they were trying to make some form of a hybrid of whatever this guy could do. But then that says to me that they must have been aware, like what they do after, of the power that this creature could, or this being could possess while being in the actual natural sunlight.
So we see here after Batman and Cyborg more or less safe, you know, they get Superman out. We see Barry collapses as, you know, timelines continue to change and memories are starting to collapse on one another. And this next scene here, even though Superman is not Superman we know, he literally just vaporizes everyone with his heat vision. Gotta remember, he's not in tune with his powers like he would be when he's older, because he's not learned how to use his powers in the right way. He just melts everything down in sight. I mean, this was very, very horrific for a cartoon. You know, you're seeing people melted down. I mean, what was your thoughts on that?
I just thought the whole of this was just weird. Like even the room that they walk into when they let him out, the S is not quite a complete Superman S, is it? It's like it's based on the symbol that's on his chest. And then when you get in there and you see that he's this skinny version of Superman, that, you know, you immediately start having to ask questions of, especially like you say, when you see him not being able to even control or use his powers even remotely in a positive way. Like he can't control anything he's doing, and he immediately kills loads of different people, which is something that we know that a Superman wouldn't have necessarily done until he's obviously been given, you know, reason or the red kryptonite stuff. But yeah, we get a subtle hint at his ship as well, the ship that he came in, and that's when we get this version of these experiments that have clearly been taking place, these test tubes and things with creatures all in them, because obviously they're taking the genetics from this weaker version of this Kryptonian being, and he's just not right. Like the whole version of this Superman here is just not right. It's just not, like I say, you can't really even refer to this as Superman. It's nothing to do with it. He's got less power and less abilities than you know, if we've seen Superboy, I'm talking Super Baby. There's probably times where the baby had more ability when he was growing up with the Kents than this version of Superman does.
Yeah, absolutely.
Practically useless apart from getting him out that scene there.
That's pretty much all we did, really. I mean, you didn't really do much else after that. So after this scene, we see Barry is taken back to Billy Batson's home to recuperate, and learns that Hal Jordan's attack has failed, and they see that the final battle between the Amazons and the Atlanteans has begun. And Barry here more or less convinces everyone to help him stop the war as they head towards London aboard Thomas Wayne's ship, only to be shot down upon arrival. So this is essentially, now we're getting ready for the final battle here, and we see Black Manta gets killed off. We see Batman's wounded by Ocean Master, and then this is the moment where Barry learns the truth about what Thawne did, but obviously Barry has to take a big part of the blame as well. How did you feel about the way Thawne revealed himself?
Once again, just another thing thrown out of nowhere, Barry, it was like almost like a blink of an eye, wasn't it? Like, oh, this must have been something to do with Thorn. Hey, Barry, like,
Yeah, I know.
what? Like, what? Where did this come from? Like, no, because like I said, I don't want to just come across overly negative. I've tried to
No.
at least give this the, no, well, yeah, pun intended, justice that it deserves. But because obviously we've not discussed the fact that they also recruit in the Shazam kids, which in this version of it, the Shazam kids is not just one kid, is it? It's like a group of different kids or whatever.
Yeah, it's pretty much more or less.
Don't really know how these Shazam kids all can become Shazam at the same time. Like, do they all become one Shazam, or do they become their own Shazams? It didn't look like that in this to me, but like we get introduced to the Shazam kids. So,
And also another thing as well, before we get into this the big scene here, is Lois is alive in this timeline, or this altered timeline, if you will, and we see her is taken in by the resistance team. What was your thoughts on the way Lois was introduced into this? Do you think she was needed to be in this movie, or do you think she was just not needed?
well, she's being chased, isn't she? In one
Yeah,
scene, she's being chased. I'm not sure. I think this may have been a few scenes ago, or is this actually coming up now? Is this what happens
I
now?
think this was like slightly before this. This might have been slightly before.
Like, I'm remembering it happening where Lois is definitely not right at the end.
No, it
It's
wasn't
more,
not right at the end.
it's more before that, like because we get the Superman around the time when the Lex Luthor thing happened, if I'm not wrong, possibly.
Yeah, it would have
It
been
actually
around that
happened a
time.
while
Yeah,
back. I did mention that Lois Lane was around at some point. But yeah, she gets chased, doesn't she, by the resistance fighters. Yeah, here it is. It's actually when Flash and Batman managed to turn Barry back into the Flash and Flash saves Thomas from falling. It's very confusing. It was then that it cuts to the scene with Lois running, and then she gets introduced to the freedom fighters. But she thinks, or they think that they saved her, but it isn't them that saved her. It's actually Zoom. And that's how Barry figures out that Zoom is around, or the Reverse Flash is around, because there's another speedster. So yeah, it's nice that we mentioned this now. But yeah, Lois Lane, she basically escapes away from the Atlanteans, but then they find her and trap her, and she is about to get killed. But then a speedster actually helps her. But it makes it look like it's the speedster, it's the freedom fighters, and they actually take credit for it as well, even though they think that it was them. Like, they don't say it wasn't them, but then they don't say it was them. But it's a grifter,
we got Grifter,
Godiva's there. Grifter, Godiva,
Godiva.
Godiva, and you got the Canterbury Crickets there as well, or whatever his name is. That's what I
Yeah,
picked up. I forget what his name is. Canterman Cricket, or whatever his name is. And then there's some kind of like
Etrigan. That's it. Remember now, it's
yeah.
Etrigan, the demon.
What's the cricket's name? It's like Canterbury Cricket or something like that, yeah. But it just made me think of Canterbury or whatever.
Not entirely sure. I can't remember what he was called,
And then
but it might
there's
be.
actually another one as well. There's a bigger version of him, which was like a gargoyle type of person.
Yeah. No, I can't remember what he was called now.
There was four. There was three original. Um, sorry, four original freedom fighters, and then the demon comes
Yeah.
up. The Etrigan or whatever his name is, he comes up. So there's five of them altogether. But it's
Yes.
definitely Grifter, Godiva, Etrigan, the cricket guy, and then there's this other person as well who looks like a gargoyle.
Yeah. It's pretty much all of most of the freedom fighters.
That's the whole team there, and then obviously they come back into it later on, don't they? They come back into it when they recruit in Shazam, and they have to recruit. Like, this is basically the most hodgepodge version of the Justice League that you will ever see in any circumstance whatsoever. I mean, apart from obviously some form of Batman, Barry, and Cyborg. You know what I mean? Like, at least they are what they are. But we do also get, before the final battle, where the paradox is changing and Barry's suffering, getting like it's sieges and stuff, because you know the timeline's changing, things are being changed out that are out of his power.
Yeah, that's right. He starts to suffer seizures, and we see
That's where we get the Hal Jordan um attempt at taking on the Atlanteans, but obviously he gets captured, and or he destroys the beast thing that pops up out of the water. And
yeah,
then we get the Shazam scene. So we're right up to speed now as when we're leading into the final battle between
yeah,
evil and less evil. You know what I mean? Like there's
yeah.
no good in this. I'm sorry,
No,
but
there's
there's
no
no
one good
good in
here.
this. So
There's
yeah,
no.
they go to fly into the battle in a normal like charter plane. It's Thomas Wayne's plane, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Thomas
And
Wayne's jet.
are immediately shot down by the Atlanteans, who are obviously just happen to be in that vicinity. But yeah, if you want to lead us through this next part
So
of the film.
we learn in this scene while Thorne's just beating the tar out of Barry that Barry was the one who ran back in time, and Thorne pretty much says to him, "Unless you went back in time to save someone you love." And we just get here classic Thorne just taunting Barry here, and I thought this was actually a really good scene because Thorne is just basically just as you say, just the classic villain, just basically talks to him. So, oh, did Barry want his mom? Oh, wow, you know, all that sort of thing. So that was actually quite a good scene here. And then we get basically everyone just going at it, really, more or less. Superman comes back and he dismembers Aquaman.
Because the
Hurt.
war starts, you think the war starts between the Amazonians and the Atlanteans, doesn't it? Between
Yeah,
Wonder Woman and Aquaman, they start the actual original war first. And then that's where, because this is where it becomes, for me, it became even more confusing, because I thought, until this point, I actually thought that Aquaman and Wonder Woman were just working together. But
yeah,
then it was here when I realized, well, they're not working together. Like this is a three-way dance now. Like who's on who? Like what? Once again, and I'm gonna say this for like the fifth or sixth review in a row. Yeah, but whose side is he on?
oh yeah, yeah. We do get this quite a lot, don't we? About whose side is he on?
It's like the start of the movie. Immediately here we get, you know, character overload, absolute character overload. Like within the first, I'm gonna say 2 minutes of this battle taking place, we get the introduction to about 15 characters. I mean, some of them have obviously already been in the film already, but you know what I mean? An overload of
Yeah,
on characters
yeah.
every
Just
single
everyone just shows up out of nowhere, don't
yeah,
they?
it comes up, everyone. And then there's more freedom fighters that we didn't get introduced to, like the guy with the gangster cloak on, like mask and hat. I don't know what character that was. You know, I've even got it written here, like, you know, who was this character? We weren't even introduced to him at all in the original scene. He wasn't the character I was on about, because the character that I was on about is in this scene. Like the gargoyle looking guy. This guy is a different character. He looks more like a guy with a mask on and a gangster outfit, like an old vintage, you know, 1960s, 50s gangsters outfit.
They never really said who that was, did they?
No, there was multiple characters who weren't even, you have to know who they are in the comic books or in the cartoons or in the films.
Yeah, that's true, actually. So we see Captain Atom gets more or less detonated and he gets executed by Wonder Woman. And then we see basically, like, as you say, time starting to slowly break down here. And we see that Thorne declares that he wants to keep Barry in this reality so he can kill him. And then there's one moment here where Thomas Wayne Batman shoots Zoom right square in the head. There's a hole in his damn head.
It doesn't it? Classic, too much talking, villain doing way too much talking. I mean, there's a lot that actually takes place between that. I think we get the battle between Wonder Woman and Aquaman that actually, you know, the Flash and Batman then get involved in Cyborg, and it's clearly obvious that Aquaman is the more villain of the two, so they actually take on Aquaman. But
Yeah,
then, like, obviously, he's got a bigger army, so it kind of actually at this stage is, you know, the Atlanteans and in fact, because another thing that I have to explain is their version as well of Captain Marvel just randomly appears in this as well. Like, did we not get introduced to this character before? Because their version of Captain Marvel just happens to pop into this, and he has a fight with Wonder Woman. There's
he
a lot
just shows
going on.
up. He just
Yeah,
more or
there's a
less
lot
shows
going
up.
on. And once again, whose side is he on? I have got absolutely no idea whose side. I think this might have even been a fourth team. Like, you know what I mean? Like, whose side was this guy on?
I know.
But there's a lot going on before the actual execution of Zoom. There is actually so much that goes on. But what's weird is previous to that, you do actually see, maybe they're calling Shazam Captain Marvel in this, because obviously Shazam and Captain Marvel, are they not the same people?
Well, originally, before the Captain Marvel, the MCU movie came out, Shazam was Captain Marvel.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I think that's why it's called Captain Marvel, because of the Shazam thing. Yeah, which we obviously know this character as Shazam. But in this, he is actually Captain Marvel, and that's very, very, very confusing for anyone who's followed along. But yeah, Batman and Batman and Grift are teamed together, don't they?
Yeah.
And take that Black Manta, he gets effed up, and then like Batman and Thingy have an exchange, don't they? Where Grift is like, "Oh, Batman," and Grift are teaming up, and of course Thomas has to be the horrible guy and said something horrible. We've also got a three-headed Cerberus running around. There's a giant Minotaur type of creature running around. There's so much going on. Batman then gets shot himself before he shoots anyone. He gets shot by the staff of Aquaman's brother. I forget what his name is now.
Ocean Master.
He shoots Batman with his staff thing, and then Wonder Woman and Shazam, Captain Marvel, carry on their fight through the building that the Flash is in. And then Batman, that's when he tells Flash, "You've got to, stop this. You need to run so fast, run back in time, that you change this." And then that's when Batman disappears randomly, and Zoom then appears. Like, it's a bit rushed. I think there should have been at least something going on. Zoom just turns up drinking a cup of coffee.
Yeah, a bit stupid, really. And before everything breaks down, Thomas Wayne gives Barry a letter to give to his son Bruce, and we essentially see Barry, because his leg's been injured by this point.
It gets messed up. Everyone gets messed up in this. Every single character is either dead or is severely hurt at the end of this fight, apart from, I'm gonna say, until Zoom gets his head top wigged. Until that moment, he is probably the most healthiest character in this. Everybody else is either dead, hurt, laying on the ground, incapacitated, whatever. Then definitely not fighting. And the beating that the Flash gets in this is insane. He gets absolutely destroyed.
Yeah, pretty much, more or less. So, as we see, Barry starts limping, and he starts racing, and then he starts eventually running. And this scene here coming up as Barry's running back in time, this is something that the Arrowverse TV series did something similar to this, where he was running and he saw himself running, and we see Barry tries to stop himself from going back to the day that his mum was murdered, and he essentially like grabs him and he stops him, and everything's all back to normal, and we see Barry wakes up in his office and he notices that things are pretty much back to how they were. And this next scene that comes up here, and I thought this was absolutely brilliant. Another great performance from Kevin Conroy. We see Barry explains to Bruce that he ran back in time, changed the past, and created this alternate timeline. And Barry gives him the letter. And it's very interesting here that Batman reads the letter as Bruce, and we actually see him have tears in his eyes. What was your thoughts on this scene as we start to wind down on this movie?
I mean, I thought that this scene was probably the most touching scene of the film, especially when you've just gone through multiple scenes of, Wonder Woman stabbing a child, the child version of Shazam, Aquaman killing or getting to the point where he obviously nearly killed Cyborg, or does kill Cyborg, or gets to the point where he's eventually stopped, isn't he, by Superman, returns to actually use some of his power to help Cyborg. And then obviously we lead into the Flash, then thus defeating Zoom with the help of Batman, let's be honest. And then we go to the sort of post-credit scene of whatever this is. I mean, don't forget, we also get the Atlanteans have got some kind of fail-safe, haven't they? Where when they lose, there's a big explosion or whatever, and it cuts to the guy who's captured or whatever. Is this Citizen's Code or whatever it is? I don't know who this is at the end, where the old man, the guy who's strapped into the boat or whatever, when it explodes, because we didn't mention there's a big nuclear style of explosion. One of these creatures that Aquaman's got tied up in a chamber. They try to let him escape, but it's too late, and then he ends up detonating or whatever. Some bomb ends up going off, and that's where Barry has to outrun the nuclear explosion. So there is a reason for Barry doing that. But yeah, when we get to this final scene, I'd say it was touching. It was nice to see the humanity. I mean, it would have been better if the whole film would have been a Justice League film, and Barry had, like, let's just reverse the whole film and say if Barry had this 10-minute scene in an alternative dimension where the Justice League had just been involved in that battle with the Rogues Gallery, this would have made more sense for Barry to have given Bruce the letter from Thomas, and said, look, I experienced something that I can't explain, but I've been to the past or a different dimension, because it isn't the past, it's just a different dimension. I've been to a different dimension, and this is from your dad. It would have made more sense, but because we didn't get any, apart from the convenient entrance of Bruce Wayne, Batman in the start of the film, and then the end film, with the scenes with that version of Batman, you know what I mean? Like, we got no investment for Batman. It was nice for Batman to get that moment, but it was unnecessary because we got hardly any of that version of Batman in this film. And leading up to that, Batman had been, until he shot the Zoom, had been quite not exactly the most likable character.
No, not really. No, he was more a villain than the others, if you really want to look at it like that.
Well, no one was good in this world, this alternative world. It didn't seem like anyone was good. Everyone was either some kind of anti-hero, because it was the human. Remember, the one thing that we're not mentioning as well is there was no human real influence in this film. It was all superheroes and super soldiers and trained, military people in this. This was not a typical version of any superhero film where you're going to get civilians. There was barely any civilian involvement in this, if any.
There wasn't much human element to this. It was just, as you say, just all superpowered beings, more or less.
I mean, I did enjoy that, and obviously we did also, before that scene with Bruce and thingy, we did get the Iris and Barry talking, because he's back into the real world, into his dimension. I think he meets Iris at the gravestone again, doesn't he?
Yeah, he meets her again.
Overall, I've been quite negative, but this felt, and I'm going to say this openly, this felt like, and it was obviously supposed to be, start and the end was supposed to be part of the same thing, and the middle was supposed to be something different. But this truly, in animation form, felt like one 20-minute episode that could have been wrapped up with a little bits of bobs in the middle, and then a 60-minute different episode that was based around something completely different.
Yeah, it did, more or less. I mean, it was enjoyable for what it was, but at the same time, there was just lots of plot holes and stuff that didn't quite mesh together. Essentially, really, this felt like 2 or 3 different movies all in one.
It definitely felt like 2 different movies in one, like, because of the progression of how quickly we went from the original scene taking on those Rogues Gallery of villains, of the Flash villains, the Rogues, then quickly into this alternative world of the Flash, and then quickly back into the world when he saved the day, back into this world with the prequel. It was almost like, right, so where was the first 45 minutes of the Justice League stopping the Rogues Gallery? Because they seemed like they were part of the film that was at the end, and the start of the film. the middle bit just had no bearing apart from, like you say, it should have been a Flash film, because this was more of like a film to build the Flash's character than anything else that you'd seen. Thus, then you've also got to explain, so does this Flash return? So why would he return with the memories of having the first accident? Because he wasn't then the Flash. There's some questions that I have to ask about this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, of course, I definitely agree. I don't know, really. Just it felt like they couldn't decide what they wanted this to be. Did they want this to be a Justice League movie, or do they just want this to be a Flash movie? It's just like they couldn't decide what to do. So you know what, we'll just stick the two together and just hope for the best, really.
It felt to me like this was the first 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes or so, and then the last 5 to 8 minutes felt like a 22-minute pilot for a Flash origin story, animated series. Yeah.
Yeah.
The middle part felt like 60 minutes of what would have been some kind of Justice League Dark or Justice League Elseworlds type of film. And it's
Yeah.
like at the last minute they decided to just blend the two things in together, because the Flash was featured in both of them, and it was all the same animators that were featured in the animation of it. But if you were a real viewer and a real follower of these series and these characters, you'd be able to quickly point out that these characters don't even seem like they're part of the same. They're obviously not part of the same dimension in this, but there's no reference to these characters. They're not even the same people.
No, they're definitely not. So before we wrap this up, we're going to do our rating. Rex, what would you rate Flashpoint Paradox out of?
You know what? I'm going to be honest. Out of the movies, this is going to be the worst. I'm actually just going to give this one a 6, because I just thought there's too many questions to ask. There's too much stuff that didn't make sense in this. Even if I'd have gone into this understanding some of this, I still would have been asking questions after. So I'm going to give it a 6, because it's watchable and it's definitely worth watching, but it's definitely not one of the ones that I would recommend. It's definitely, if we've already experienced what I would believe is possibly 2 out of my top 3 in The Mask of the Phantasm and Under the Red Hood, this has got to be way down somewhere deep below a lot of other ones. I've seen quite a lot of, other ones like Sub-Zero. This is nowhere near that. And I'm going to be honest, this is nowhere near. And I don't think that that's even that good, but this is nowhere near that.
No, I think I'll agree with you as well. I mean, I enjoyed this for what it was, but if I'm truly honest, I would probably give this a 6 as well, which is a shame, really, because Flash is one of my favorite DC characters.
Animation wise, it's 9 and 10.
Yeah,
Picture wise, character wise, 9, 10. Storyline wise, plot wise, like it's low. And I mean low. Like you will be very, very confused if you don't actually fully understand who some of these characters are. The absolute waste of some of the biggest characters and some unused characters at this stage in 20. Remember, we have to look at this as well, Warhawk. This is 2013, this came out. Some of these characters were unused in 2013. We hadn't seen Ocean Master. We hadn't seen those types of characters. Deathstroke was being used perfectly well in the Arrow universe, and they killed him off like they did in this. Come on. Honestly, some of these standalone characters like Clayface, we've never seen Clayface to a certain extent, outside of what some of the animated series and that kind of stuff. And this is what we got given with Clayface, a 22-second cameo where he manages to hold off some of the people briefly and then gets taken out. Like, come on. I'm sure they could have done better than that.
And also, if you are wanting to get into Flashpoint, I would highly recommend read the graphic novel first before you watch the movie, because I think you'll get a better understanding of the story, graphic novel wise, than you do here with the movie. So that's going to be it from us. We're going to wrap it up now. What was your thoughts on Justice League Flashpoint Paradox? Do you agree with what me and Rex said? Did you enjoy this? And if so, what was your favourite scenes? And where would you rank this with other DC animated movies? Would you rank it higher or would you rank it lower? Or is there anything you would change to this that would make it better? You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below. Rex the Boss, great having you here again as always. and look forward to reviewing the next one with you.
It's been a pleasure.
Take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening, and we will see all of you next time for another edition. Bye for now.